We're not exclusive until I say so, she said while texting another guy in my bed. I packed without a word and left. He dumped her in 2 weeks. Now mutual friends say she cries about losing me at every party. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. I thought Sundays were our religion. For a year, that had been the unwavering truth. The lazy morning, in my bed, the smell of coffee mingling with her lavender shampoo, the quiet hum of the city outside my apartment that felt for those few hours like it existed just for us. This particular Sunday was a perfect specimen. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the rumpled sheets. Chloe was a warm weight against my side, her back to me, her attention focused on the glowing screen in her hands. I remember feeling a deep, unshakable sense of rightness. This was it. This was the piece everyone talked about. I'd spent the last 6 months secretly saving for a ring, mentally composing the speech I'd give when I asked her to make this a permanent fixture. I'd even started browsing real estate listings for places with a bigger kitchen because she loved to bake when she was stressed. I nudged her shoulder gently. Hey, you're supposed to be ignoring the outside world. It's the rule. She let out a soft, airy laugh. Not the full one that crinkled the corners of her eyes, but the one she used when she was distracted. Just 1 second. This is funny. I rolled onto my side, propping my head on my hand to look at her. She was smiling, a genuine, private little smile at her phone. Her thumbs were flying across the screen. It was the same smile she'd given me last night when I'd surprised her with tickets to see that band she loved. A cold, tiny knot began to form in my stomach. Who's so entertaining this early? I asked, keeping my voice light. Did Sarah finally leave her terrible boyfriend? Oh no, not Sarah. The knot tightened. She didn't offer anything else. The typing continued. A flashback hit me, unbidden and cruel. 2 months ago, at her parents' house for dinner, her father had clapped me on the shoulder, passing me a beer. You're good for her, Mark, he'd said, his voice low and sincere. She settled down. We're glad it's you. I had swelled with pride, feeling like I'd been granted a key to a sacred inner circle. The memory shattered as Chloe let out another soft giggle. Chloe, I said, my voice losing its playful edge. Who are you talking to? She finally turned her head, her eyes still holding the ghost of her phone screen smile. Just this guy, Leo, from my spin class. He's hilarious. The name meant nothing but the way she said it. Casual, unguarded, as if telling me she was talking to the mailman sent a jolt through me. This wasn't a secret. In her mind, there was nothing to hide. Leo, I repeated the word, feeling foreign and acidic in my mouth. I sat up the sheets, pulling around my waist. The cozy warmth of the room suddenly felt suffocating. And why is Leo texting you on a Sunday morning? She sighed a theatrical put-upon sound and rolled onto her back to look at me. Don't start, Mark. He just sent me a funny meme and we got to talking. It's not a big deal. It feels like a big deal. I said, my voice low. It feels like a very big deal when you're lying in my bed, in the space we share, giggling at texts from another man. Your bed, she shot back, an eyebrow arched. Are we keeping score now? And I'm not giggling. God, you're being possessive. The pivot was masterful. I was the one with the problem. I was the one being unreasonable. For a second, I doubted myself. Was I overreacting? Was this just a harmless work friend? Possessive? I managed to get out. Chloe, we've been together for a year. I met your parents. You have a toothbrush in my bathroom. We talk about moving in together. How is this possessive? She sat up now too, drawing her knees to her chest, creating a physical barrier between us. The phone was still clutched in her hand, a dormant threat. Mark, we need to get something clear, she said, and her tone was suddenly chillingly calm. It was the voice she used to explain a complex concept to someone she thought was slow. We are dating. We are having fun, but we are not exclusive until I say so. The air left my lungs. It was as if she had swung a sledgehammer into my chest. The words hung in the space between us, ugly and absolute. We are not exclusive until I say so. I stared at her. I searched her face for a hint of a joke, for the panic of someone who had said something they didn't mean. There was none. There was only smug certainty. She genuinely believed this. She had built this entire relationship on a foundation I didn't know existed. Are you serious? I heard myself whisper, the sound strangled. After everything, the trips, the family dinners, the future we talk about that's just dating, that's just fun for you. It's not about what it is for me, she said, her logic so twisted it was dizzying. It's a fact. You can't just assume these things. You have to have the conversation. We never had the conversation. The conversation, I echoed, a hollow laugh escaping me. You think I needed to formally request exclusivity after I spent Christmas with your family? What was that, Chloe? A focus group. Don't be dramatic, she scoffed, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. You're completely overreacting. It's just texting. Leo is just a friend. Who you smile at like that in my bed, I said, my voice now dangerously quiet. The spell was broken. The scales had fallen. The woman I loved, the future I'd envisioned, it was all a mirage. I had been living in a house she owned, following rules I never knew existed. I looked at her for a long, silent moment. The lavender scent that usually comforted me now felt cloying. The sunlight felt invasive. The warmth of her body next to mine felt like a lie. The love in my heart didn't shatter. It simply evaporated, leaving behind a cold, clear clarity. Without another word, I threw the covers back and got out of bed. Finally giving up the tantrum, she asked a triumphant little smirk on her face. She thought she'd won. She thought I was going to the bathroom to cool off, that I would come back and apologize for my possessiveness. I didn't answer. I walked to the closet, pulled my large suitcase from the top shelf and laid it open on the floor. The sound of the zipper was the only noise in the room. The sound of the suitcase zipper cutting through the silence was more definitive than any slamming door. Chloe's smirk faltered. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice laced with a blend of confusion and annoyance. I didn't look at her. I opened my dresser drawer and began taking out stacks of my t-shirts, placing them in the suitcase with methodical precision. Fold, place, fold, place. It was a rhythm that kept the chaos in my head at bay. Mark, stop being ridiculous. This is a tantrum. A really childish tantrum. I moved to the next drawer. My socks and boxes. I was a machine programmed for evacuation. The physical act of packing was an anchor in the hurricane of her words. We are not exclusive until I say so. Each item I packed was a brick in the wall I was building between that statement and my future. I heard the bed creak as she got up. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, wrapped in the sheet, her arms crossed. "So, what? You're just going to leave over this?" I finally paused a pair of socks in my hand and looked at her. I didn't see the woman I loved anymore. I saw a stranger who had been living in my home under false pretenses. My voice was flat, devoid of the anger she was trying to provoke. "There is no this. There's only the truth I was too blind to see. We're done." A flash of genuine panic crossed her face. This wasn't going according to her script. In her script, I begged. I argued my case. I proved my love by fighting for her. My calm detachment was a variable she hadn't accounted for. "You can't just decide we're done," she protested, her voice rising. "It doesn't work like that." "It works exactly like that," I said, turning back to the closet for my hanging clothes. I pulled a handful of dress shirts still in their dry cleaning plastic and laid them in the suitcase. "You've set the rules. I'm just finally choosing not to play. You're overreacting." It was just texting. I stopped and faced her fully. The cold clarity was absolute now. It wasn't the texting, Chloe. It was the philosophy. You were in my bed disrespecting me to my face and justifying it with a technicality you invented. There's no coming back from that. I won't love someone who needs a signed contract to not cheat on me. The word cheat hung in the air. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I didn't cheat," she yelled, her composure cracking. "We weren't exclusive." I zipped the suitcase closed with a final sharp rasp. I walked to my desk, unplugged my laptop and charger, and slid them into my backpack. I picked up my passport, my wallet, my keys, the essentials of a life that was now abruptly solo. I looked around the bedroom. It was still mostly my apartment, but it felt alien contaminated. I couldn't stay here another night. I hoisted the suitcase and slung the backpack over my shoulder. I walked towards the door past her, where she stood frozen in the doorway. "Where are you going to go?" she asked, her voice small, now losing its fight. "That's no longer your concern," I said, not breaking my stride. I walked through the living room past the couch where we'd watched movies, past the kitchen where I'd cooked for her. I opened the front door and paused on the threshold. I didn't look back. "You need to be gone by the time I get back," I said, my voice calm and final. "Leave your key on the counter." I stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind me. The click of the latch was a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't known I was finishing. The first 48 hours were a numb grey haze. I booked a long-stay hotel near my office. A sterile impersonal box with a view of another sterile impersonal box. It was perfect. There were no memories here. No lounder smell. No ghosts. My phone lit up like a war room map. "Chloe, Sunday, 1104 a.m. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk about this like adults. Chloe, Sunday, 2:30 p.m. I'm still at your apartment. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. Chloe, Sunday, 5:17 p.m. Fine. I'm leaving, but this isn't over. You're being incredibly cruel." I read them with a detached curiosity, as if studying the behavioral patterns of a destructive species. There was no apology, only entitlement and blame. I swiped left on every notification and blocked her number. The silence that followed was a bomb. The next wave came through social media. Messages on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. A friend request on LinkedIn. Desperation makes people stupid, I thought, and blocked those too. I was performing a digital scorched earth policy, and with every block I felt a pound of weight lift from my shoulders. I told my best friend Mike the bare bones of it over a beer. 2 days later, she was texting some guy named Leo in my bed. Said they weren't exclusive. Mike whistled low, his face a mask of disgust. "Leo, the finance bro from her spin class. Dude, I've heard stories about that guy. He's a walk-in red flag in a polo shirt." I just shrugged. "Doesn't matter now." And it didn't. I filled the silence she left with the grind of iron at the gym, with the focused intensity of work, with the simple pleasure of reading a book without interruption. I reconnected with friends. I neglected. I said yes to invitations I would have previously declined for a quiet night with her. The world, which had shrunk to the size of our relationship, began to expand again. The karma arrived about 3 weeks later, delivered by Mike via text. Mike, Thursday, 7:22 p.m. So you're not going to believe this. Talk to Sarah. Me. Okay. Mike. No. Listen, it was bad. Apparently, the second you were out of the picture, he lost interest. Told her she was too needy and too available. Guess he just liked the chase. Me. I say, there was no satisfaction in it. Not the hot, vengeful kind I might have once imagined. It was just a cold, clinical confirmation of everything I deduced about both of them. A user got used. A game player lost her favorite toy. It was pathetically predictable. That's when the desperate pleas began. They seeped through the cracks in my digital walls. An email to my work address, which I filtered straight to trash. Mark, I know you hate me, but he was a mistake. A huge mistake? You were right about everything. Please just call me. I'm so sorry. The word sorry had finally appeared, but it was buried under the rubble of her own consequences. It wasn't an apology for her actions. It was a plea for a rescue from the results. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. It was the emotional equivalent of reading a news headline about a disaster in a country I'd never visited. Acknowledged but irrelevant to my life. I was free, and the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the peaceful, steady sound of my own heartbeat. Moving forward, the invitation to Jake's birthday party arrived via a group text from Mike. My place Saturday, be there. A month ago, I would have made an excuse. The thought of navigating a room full of mutual friends of the inevitable awkwardness with Chloe would have been enough to keep me away. But now the idea held no fear. My peace was no longer so fragile that she could shatter it. I walked in with a 6-pack of craft beer, the same as I always did. The party was in full swing, the air thick with music and laughter. I saw Mike gave him a nod and deposited the beer in the cooler. I was scanning the room for other familiar faces when I felt the air change. I didn't need to turn around to know she was there. Mark? I turned. Chloe was standing a few feet away, clutching a red solo cup like a lifeline. She looked different. The smug, effortless beauty was gone, replaced by a strained, almost frantic energy. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright. You look really good, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She was scanning me, taking in the fact that I'd put on a bit of muscle, that my posture was relaxed, that I looked happy. It clearly unnerved her. Thanks. How are you? I asked. I deliberately used the same polite, detached tone I practiced in my head. It wasn't a question that sought an answer. It was a social placeholder. The question and its delivery seemed to unlock something in her. The dam broke. I'm a mess, she blurted out, her eyes welling with tears on cue. A complete mess, Mark. I've been a mess since you left. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I took a slow sip of my beer. I'm sorry to hear that. The words were empty, devoid of any real sympathy. They were a wall. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Leo, hey, was a monster. He used me. The second you were gone, he just changed. He dumped me after 2 weeks. Said I was too clingy. Can you believe that? I could in fact believe it quite easily. I said nothing. I just looked at her, waiting for the performance to continue. Aren't you going to say anything? She pleaded, her voice cracking. Don't you miss me? Don't you miss us? What we had was real. I know it was. This was the crux of it. The final desperate grasp at the narrative she'd built. I looked at her, and for the first time, a faint, pitying smile touched my lips. It wasn't a smile of warmth, but of finality. Chloe, the us you're talking about, I said, my voice calm and clear. It never existed. You made that perfectly clear when you were texting another man in my bed. The mention of the specific humiliating scene made her flinch. The tears dried up, instantly replaced by a flash of raw anger. The mask was slipping, showing the petulant child beneath. So you're just going to hold that over me forever, she hissed, her voice rising enough that a few people nearby glanced over. I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? I'm humiliating myself here. This was it. The moment of truth. She wasn't sorry for her actions. She was sorry she was facing the consequences. She wasn't here for me. She was here for the comfort and stability I provided. The last vestige of any lingering doubt evaporated. I set my beer down on a nearby table. The gesture was slow, deliberate, signaling the end of the conversation. I don't want anything, I said, my voice firm, quiet, and absolute. It cut through the party's noise. That's the point. I don't want an apology, and I don't want you. You're a part of my past. I've moved on. I saw the words land like physical blows. Her face crumpled. She opened her mouth to protest, to scream, to say something, anything that would force me back into the drama of her life. I turned to walk back to my friends, then paused. I looked over my shoulder, delivering the final quiet twist of the knife that was simply the truth. And for the record, I said, meeting her horrified gaze one last time. We were exclusive. You just didn't know it was exclusive to me. Then I walked away. I didn't look back. I heard a choked sob behind me, but it was a sound from a different world, one I no longer inhabited. I rejoined Mike and the others who were pretending they hadn't been watching. Someone clapped me on the shoulder. Someone else handed me a fresh beer. The conversation resumed, the music swelled, and I was home. I heard about the aftermath in pieces from Mike, who heard it from his girlfriend, who was still reluctantly in Chloe's orbit. The party had been her last desperate stand. After my exit, she had apparently dissolved into hysterics, sobbing so violently that a friend had to drive her home. The carefully constructed image of the carefree girl who wasn't exclusive had shattered in front of everyone, revealing the desperate, calculating reality beneath. The texts and emails stopped. The digital ghosts gave up their hauntings. The silence was now complete and permanent. Weeks turned into months. The sterile hotel room was replaced by a new apartment I loved even more than the old one. The promotion at work came through, bringing with it a new sense of purpose and a team that respected. I started dating again tentatively at first, then with a newfound confidence. I met a woman named Lena at a bookstore. She was witty, kind, and her eyes didn't scan the room for better options when she talked to me. One evening, I was at a bar with Mike watching a game. He took a long pull from his bottle and shook his head. You know, she still talks about you, he said, not looking at me. I didn't have to ask who. Yeah. Sarah says she brings you up at every party, every girl's night. Starts crying about how she lost the best thing that ever happened to her. How she fumbled the bag. It's her entire personality now. The girl who lost Mark, I felt nothing. No flicker of pride. No schadenfreude. No residual anger. It was like hearing a trivia fact about a historical figure I'd briefly studied. I said, my eyes on the screen. Mike looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. That's it. Oh, dude. She's publicly pining for you. She's a wreck. I finally turned to him, my expression calm. Mike, I don't care. And I meant it. The story was over. The book was closed. Her tears weren't a tribute to what we had. They were a monument to the comfort she missed. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the placeholder she'd mistakenly thought would always be there. The greatest revenge wasn't success or a new girlfriend. It wasn't her public humiliation or her private misery. It was the silence in my own head when I thought of her. It was the genuine, unforced smile when Lena texted me, "Good morning." It was the simple, profound piece of a Sunday spent entirely on my own terms. She had said, "We're not exclusive until I say so." And my final unspoken answer, the one that echoed in every quiet moment of my new life, was simply, "And I am not available ever again." The karma wasn't in her downfall. It was in my peace, and it was everything. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.